We stood for a more democratic society.
Nonviolent organizers.
We stood for the right of people to be human.
Aggressive justice.
Let the people decide.
The letters SNCC stands for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Commonly called SNICK for its initials.
SNCC was founded in April 1960 to serve as an effort to bring together all the young people who have been participating in sit-ins across the South.
These students were Southern students. They were not going to live like their parents and their grandparents lived.
We accepted nonviolence, not simply as a technique or as a tactic, but as a way of life, as a way of living.
If I'm in a picket line and someone comes up and strikes me, I'm not going to strike him back. If I'm marching down the street in a protest march and someone spits at me, I'm not going to spit back at him.
People that were prepared and willing to go into hell's fire.
Well, my trouble is hard, so hard. Well, my trouble is hard, so hard.
SNCC's job was to facilitate whatever these students needed. If they went to jail, it was to find a way to get them out of jail. SNCC's job was not to dictate to these communities what their movement was about. The organization really just did the coordination to support all of these student activities that happened from Nashville all through the Carolinas into Georgia. I didn't want to go. I was too afraid. But it was like, if I'm going around on campuses telling people that they should help in the South and I don't do it, what kind of hypocrite am I? So I ended up there and developed a whole literacy project.
It was very hard, almost impossible for people of color to register to vote. You had to pass a so-called literacy test. Some people had been beaten, shot and killed for attempting to register to vote. So we were determined to do all we could to get people registered to vote in the South.
Sometime in the fire, sweet Jesus, He carried me.
The Student Voice was a 4-page, little 8 by 10 sheet, 4 pages fastened together, that we printed in our own offices in Atlanta and distributed in the cities and towns, mostly small rural towns where we're working. I joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960, and my role was to be the communication director, or sort of the publicist.
From being a part of the national movement, I was already a member because the local group became part of SNCC. Before we even go on a sit-in, we studied, we prepared ourselves. We studied the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence.
Demonstration would be held at a restaurant or some public facility that was closed to black people. We'd march in an orderly fashion, occupy those seats,
waiting to be served. And someone would come up and spit on you, or put a lighted cigarette out in your hair. Maybe someone would walk up and pull you off the stool or start beating you.
Every state agency could be utilized to enforce segregation with grave consequences. It was like going into the belly of the beast.
In May of 1963, I became the 3rd chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I was 23 years old, and so on August 28, 1963, 10 of us were scheduled to speak. I spoke number 6, Dr. King spoke number 10.
The Catholic Archbishop of Washington threatened not to give the invocation unless John Lewis changed his speech. He objected to some of the language in John Lewis's speech.
When I read it, it shocked me in a way, because I thought, gosh, this is an angry John Lewis. And of course, we were all angry. The Kennedy administration was worried that it made the United States look terrible. And they didn't want that kind of criticism.
And finally, only with the request of A. Philip Randolph, the man who had really called this march into being, John said later, I couldn't say no to Dr. Randolph, and so he changed it.
To those who have said, be patient and wait, we must say that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. There was so much hope, so much optimism after the March on Washington. But that sense of hope, that sense of optimism was shattered. 18 days later was a terrible bombing of a church in Birmingham where 4 little girls were killed.
And while it didn't produce instant change, and I don't think anybody expected that to happen, the United States had never seen anything like this. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee got people to get together, to march, to protest, to do all of the things that human beings need to do if they want to improve their condition.
This group of determined, brave, and courageous young people gave everything that we had to make America better.
The SNCC and its philosophy of not trying to build one charismatic leader to lead some movement, but actually to build leadership across the board in young women, young men of all different colors, classes, and educational backgrounds. I think that's SNCC's legacy.